The title of this evening's class is The DNA and the True Cause of Disease. And all of us today are born with a little weakness or two in our DNA. But it needn't define us. That's the good news. Because the fact is that though genetics may load the gun, it is lifestyle that pulls the trigger. So let me begin by sharing a story with you. It's the story of my father. My father died at 92 6 years ago, so that was a good innings. But my father always had asthma. And as the eldest girl in the family, I always used to bring him his puffer. And it was a rubber bowl with glass tubing and a little cork in one end, and he'd put medicine in and he'd inhale the puffer. My father eventually conquered his asthma at the age of 51 when he gave up dairy products. I'm one of 5 children. I'm the eldest girl, then there was my brother, and then 4 girls. And then my younger sister was born. I was 8 years of age, and within a few months, we were told that she had severe asthma. All through her childhood years, I used to sit by her bed and sing stories to her, read stories to her when she had an asthma attack. I remember her sitting on the bed and her shoulders hunching up with every breath. I remember the ambulance coming to our home and taking her away a few times. My sister eventually conquered her asthma at the age of 42 when she gave up wheat and dairy. So imagine my concern when my 5th child was showing signs of severe breathing distress. We feared for his life. I lived in a rainforest. This child, I'd actually delivered him myself. We had home births, breastfed, and here was this baby in severe breathing distress. So it's an illustration how it comes through in the genes. I took him to the hospital for fearing for his life. They gave him Ventolin, which is a drug that opens the bronchioles. But I quickly saw that it really didn't do a lot. And then I read in the newspaper that Ventolin reduces lung capacity. The very drug to open these bronchioles and to help in the breathing distress is reducing lung capacity. So I took him to a naturopath. And the naturopath quickly saw that Peter had a weakness. So he told me some things I could do. He told me of some water treatments, hot and colds on the chest. He told me of some herbs to give him. He said that whenever he gets a cold, you see, within 24 hours, he'd go into severe breathing distress. Whenever he gets a cold, only give him fruit. He was still breastfed. He was about 14 months. And so that's what I did. And with doing all the things that the naturopath told me, the breathing distress went from 24 hours to 5 hours. I was impressed because remember, my younger sister, my father, all my life I've had people in my home that had their puffers for asthma. At the age of 2.5, I went into labour. When Peter was 2.5, I went into labour with my 6th child. When I went into labour, Peter got a cold. So I was challenged. And there's one emotion that we should never make a decision on, and that is fear. And the fear rose in me, what if Peter was in severe breathing distress when I'm giving birth to the baby? But you know, there's another emotion that God wants us to hold on to, and that's faith. Faith in an incredible body that can heal itself, knowing that I have done all I possibly can to help Peter. Well, baby William was born and Peter never went into breathing distress. In fact, he never went into breathing distress again. What I found that every time we got a cold, the breathing distress got a little less and a little less and a little less. So I saw from my own experience that yes, genetics may load the gun, but it is lifestyle that pulls the trigger. There are two systems in medicine today. One is based on faith and one is based on fear. The system based on faith is based on the fact that we were created. And our body was created with an inbuilt ability to heal itself. And as we go through this series, you'll see sometimes there are herbs that can be given, and these herbs work with this to bring about healing. And what I tell you here is the truth. The other system that's based on faith is based on a theory that we evolved. I don't believe this theory. I believe what the Bible says, that we were created in the image of God. What an honor. Back to the fear system, because we evolved, the body cannot heal. And because it cannot heal, then something has to be given to it, which is drugs. But let me tell you that drugs never cure disease. They certainly may save a life in a crisis, there is no doubt about that, but they cannot heal. There's only one thing that has an ability to heal, and that is the body. The pharmaceutical company is a company that is based on deception. God's government is a government of freedom, and freedom is based on free choice. I am the master of my destiny. I am the one that chooses what I do to my body and what I don't do to my body. It's my God-given right. And if any system comes along with mandates, it's time to be very concerned. Very concerned, and that's the time to stand and say, excuse me, but it's my God-given right that if I choose not to do that to my body. So I like to establish that grounding as we begin on our first day of looking at this incredible body and its inbuilt ability to heal itself. And so some people, when they get sick, they say, it's in my genes. So let's have a look at the genes. And unfortunately, there's even famous movie stars that are having both breasts removed because they found out they've got the gene. But as you'll see tonight, there's actually no need to do that. So let's go inside. It's what I call the CBD, the Central Business District of the human body, the inside workings of the cell. And we find right in the very nucleus of the cell is the DNA. The DNA is the genetic code that determines the colour of our hair, colour of our eyes, colour of our skin. We have 23 chromosomes from our mother, and we have 23 chromosomes from our father. There's a huge amount of information in this DNA. And in 1953, it made headlines in the newspaper, Secret of Life had been discovered. Watson and Crick's, two scientists, had been able to unravel the DNA. You see, it's all coiled up into the nucleus, but they were able to pull it out. And I'm sure we've seen illustrations of this coil. What's it made of? The outside strands are made up of polysaccharides, and polysaccharides simply means many sugars. And everything we eat is made up of many sugars. The inside bands is made up of amino acids. So that delicious supper that we just had, polysaccharides were in the salads, they're in the soup. Amino acids were in the lentils in the soup. And the glue that glues these together is minerals. And minerals are found mostly in vegetables. They're a little bit everywhere, but vegetables are the highest source. And of the vegetable kingdom, the highest source is dark green leafy vegetables. So we had a nice little illustration of a meal that will help to feed our DNA tonight. Huge amount of information in there, and all the information is in every single cell, and this is 75 trillion. Remember, there's 25 trillion red blood cells, and the red blood cells are made in the bone marrow. So the other 75 trillion have this nucleus which in the DNA is in that nucleus. We're constantly being remade. Do you know you have new eye cells every 1 to 2 days? The cells that line our gastrointestinal tract, they're remade every 3 to 5 days. And tomorrow, when we begin our journey going through our gastrointestinal tract, we'll be looking at the gut in more detail. We have a new skin every month. We have a new liver every 6 weeks. We have new bones every 3 months. We're constantly being remade according to the pattern, according to the formula inside the DNA. So if that is true, how come someone with irritable bowel, how come they don't heal in, let's be generous and say 2 weeks? Is that a reasonable question? I'd like to suggest it's very reasonable, especially if the cells that line our gut are remade every 3 to 5 days. So I'd like to address that. But first of all, let me show you how the new cell is made. DNA cannot leave, even though it can be pulled out and coiled back in, it cannot leave. And so a photocopy is made. It's called RNA. So the photocopy comes down to a little section in the cell called ribosome. And ribosome is the little section in the cell where the new cell is made. So RNA comes down with the information into ribosome, and then the new cell starts to be made. And I'm going to explain it like the building of a brick wall for purposes of illustration. So the first brick goes down, and each brick is an amino acid. Maybe it's phenylalanine. The next brick is, maybe it's methionine. The next brick goes down, maybe it's lysine. The next brick goes down, maybe it's tyrosine. So you can see that every amino acid is a slightly different shape and it fits into the next one just like a jigsaw. It's an incredible body that we live in. And every 3 to 5 days, out pops a new gastrointestinal tract cell. So what happens with irritable bowel? Well, I'm going to do a hypothesis here and look at some possibilities of why someone with irritable bowel can still have it 30 years later, and I've met such people. Why isn't it healing? So let's have a look at some possibilities. So RNA makes a photocopy. RNA is the photocopy of how to make a new gastrointestinal tract. So the first brick goes down, maybe phenylalanine is there, and we're ready for the next brick, but there's a piece of information missing. So what goes there now? We've got another problem. There's a rogue cell. And this rogue cell is a breakdown from environmental poisons, genetically modified foods. It actually doesn't fit anywhere, and it's always looking for somewhere to poke itself, and it sees the opportunity. And then the next one comes, which is lysine. Well, where does it fit? It actually does the best that it can, but it doesn't fit very well. And now we've got another problem. The person is missing an amino acid. Why would that be? Because they're drinking with their meals, they're watering down their hydrochloric acid, they're chew, swallow, and they're stressed out. So actually, they did eat it, but it came out the other end because it wasn't broken down properly. And there's another rogue cell, always looking for somewhere to put itself. And every 3 to 5 days, out pops a new irritable bowel syndrome cell. Can you see the possible scenarios that are the reason why someone can have irritable bowel syndrome for 10, 20, 30 years? Because if given the right conditions, knowing that the cells are remade every 3 to 5 days, it should be healed in a couple of weeks. Well, I can tell you that we see people heal from irritable bowel, Crohn's disease, colitis. We're going to look at that tomorrow when we go on our journey through our gastrointestinal tract. What I'd like to look at now is what's causing this damage. But aren't there cells, enzymes, that are constantly going up and down, healing any glitches? There are. But if the person's not supplying the basic nutrients to build those enzymes, can you see they can be lacking? It's actually like asking our sons. We've got 4 sons, they're builders and tilers and carpenters and landscapers, and we're saying, boys, we'd like you to build an extension on our house. So they get the time off work, they come with all their tools, and they look at us and say, where are the building materials? And we say, oh, sorry, we couldn't afford them. Maybe we just got some scrap timber from out in the bush. You call it the woods, yeah? We call it the bush. Can they build an extension? Not at all. And it's the same with the human body. If you're not supplying the basic nutrients that the body needs, even to the very DNA, how can the body be remade? Because God designed the body to constantly being remade, and in that remake to the healing. So let's have a look at what causes the damage in the DNA. Proverbs 26 verse 2 states that the curse causeless shall not come. It's Old English. It basically means no problem, no curse happens without a cause. That's why we should ever be asking why. Rudyard Kipling wrote a whole poem on this. I'll give you the first stanza. He said, I have 6 trusty serving men. They taught me all I know. Their names are what, why, when, where, how, and who. Do you take them with you everywhere you go? Because there is always a cause. I was discussing a man's health problems about 10 years ago in Victoria, at the bottom of Australia. I said to him, what sort of work do you do? He said, I'm a private investigator. I said, so am I. Shouldn't we all be private investigators? Because nothing happens for no reason. And that's why, in case of sickness, always ascertain the cause. How do you ascertain the cause? You look at the history. Exposure to chemicals, exposure to environmental poisons, exposure to molds, vaccines, drugs. These can all be contributing factors. But where you start is here. Symptoms. You know what symptoms are? It's the body saying, excuse me, can you do something here? And then what you do is you observe the body's response. And have you found that sometimes the body will say, thank you. And sometimes the body will say, can you not play tennis while you've got a torn meniscus? Have you listened? And it won't be torn forever. It actually will be if you keep playing tennis. There's a bit of basic common sense there, isn't there? And common sense isn't very common today. And being your own doctor, you've got to have common sense. The story I just told you about the little boy with the finger, putting it in the hot and coals and the grated potato, what did that finger say to him? Yes. Keep doing that. He was only 7, and he knew because his body said yes. So let's have a look at what causes this damage. 92% of DNA damage, the research is showing, is caused by a mineral deficiency. Interesting. A mineral deficiency? So what would be the reason for the mineral deficiency? When someone's eating fast food, not eating any fruits and vegetables, it's obvious they're going to have some deficiencies. But there are people today who are eating fresh fruits and vegetables every day, and they're showing deficiencies. Why? In his book, The Calcium Lie, Dr. Robert Thompson, interesting, Dr. Robert Thompson was getting frustrated with his job because people weren't getting better. Is that happening? Yeah. But 7 years is a long time. So instead of getting out of medicine, he decided to do a nutrition course. His eyes were opened. And so he's written the book, The Calcium Lie. It's called The Calcium Lie because he shows that bones aren't made of calcium. We'll look at that when we look at osteoporosis, which I know we're going to be looking at a whole lecture on that. He shows in his book that 50 years ago, there was twice as many minerals in the soil as there is today. Why? It's because of the way agriculture was done. The same crop is put in the same ground again and again. And so the crop's not growing very well, so they pump it full of superphosphate. Superphosphate creates show ponies of vegetables, looks good, doesn't taste any good. Have you ever eaten an apple off a tree? The flavour's incredible. A strawberry out of a strawberry, well, organic, of course. You know what you're tasting? You're tasting minerals. And what happens is the organic farmer, he works with the soil. He feeds his soil. And when he feeds his soil, he feeds the microorganisms in the soil. And those microorganisms help to get the minerals out of the dirt and into the plant. That's why one organic tomato will give you 9 times the iron compared to a conventionally grown tomato. So you might go into the shop and look at the celery. The organic celery may be twice, 3 times the price. Well, you're getting more than 3 times the minerals. Maybe that'll help you buy more organic. And remember, the more Americans that buy organic, the more organic will be available. So the soil's deficient, the plant's deficient, and the person that eats that plant will be deficient. But there's more. Stimulants that many Americans and Australians, I find it all over the world, are reaching for because they're always tired. Why are they always tired? Is it because they're going to bed too late? Is it because they're on technology too long, et cetera, et cetera? We've got to investigate. So what are some of the stimulants that are leaching minerals? One is the refined sugar. Sugar is such an acid that when it goes into the body takes minerals to calm it down. In fact, if you were to test the urine after a person had a feed of sugar, notice I changed it from you to a person because, of course, we don't eat that refined sugar, do we? So a person was to have refined sugar and then test their urine, they would find calcium and magnesium in that urine. Calcium is the most alkaline mineral. And so it's constantly being pulled out of its storage house, which is bones, to calm down that acid condition. So what the sugar does is it's leaching the minerals. But sugar does something else. It causes the blood sugar level rise very, very quickly. And then the body adapts by releasing the insulin to get it down, and then it goes too low, and then the insulin has to stop, and then the glucagon's released, and then the person has more sugar, then it goes up again. And this whiplash, up, down, wears out pancreases. And so you're getting young children today developing diabetes at the age of 2, at the age of 4. They haven't been on the planet long enough to beat up the pancreas. We have to then look at the parents' dietary habits. And they don't tell you that on the sugar packet, do you? So sugar leaches minerals, and it also can damage the DNA. Caffeine. We call it Australia's darling. I think it's America's darling too. I found it hard to get off the escalator one day because there was such a lineup of people, 7 o'clock in the morning. Where were they lined up? Starbucks Cafe. And, you know, the coffee they were coming out with wasn't 8 ounces. They were looking like 16 ounces. So what effect does caffeine have? It disrupts the neurotransmitters in the brain. It actually causes a crisis response. That's why the person gets a little bit of a lift. And they say, I love my coffee, gets me going in the morning. You know what I say? Why do you need something to get you going? But as one young man said to me, I found something more effective than coffee to get you going in the morning. You finish your hot shower with cold. Woof. And you don't get the corresponding dump. What's the old Have you heard the poem, Choose Your Hard? Marriage is hard, divorce is hard, choose your hard. Saving's hard, being in debt's hard, choose your hard. Having caffeine for a boost after many years, do you know what happens? Your adrenal glands get exhausted and you've got no get up and go at all. That's hard. Turning the hot tap off's hard. Choose your hard. Choose your hard. So caffeine, because it disrupts the neurotransmitters in the brain, it disrupts the genes to the neurotransmitters. So you can have a couple, maybe having a couple of cup of coffee a day, a lady has a bit of chocolate every day, the guy has some Dr. Pepper's, Cokes. They can give birth to a baby who's prone to attention deficit syndrome, hyperactivity, autism because of the parents' caffeine habits. And they don't tell you that, do they? So caffeine is a very acidic substance. So once again, it's pulling the calcium and the magnesium out. And you combine these two together, you get a double whammy. So what else is leaching minerals out is alcohol. Any poison that goes into the body, it uses the minerals to calm it down. Alcohol not only does leach some minerals, but it also can damage the DNA. Alcohol is a neurotoxin. That means it kills brain cells. We're getting children born today with fetal alcohol syndrome to parents that have 2 drinks a week. That's a bit scary, isn't it? Another is tobacco. We're getting children born today with less alveoli in their lungs because of smoking parents. Notice I said parents. So what sort of gene pool are the parents giving for this baby? One girl said to me, Barbara, as soon as I fell pregnant, I stopped smoking. I said, well, I'm so glad, because every time a woman smokes, if she's pregnant, that baby misses oxygen for that split second. They've done tests. A woman has a smoke of cigarette and they have her hand under a screen that tests the blood. There's no blood in that hand for that split second that she takes that cigarette. So that baby's missing out on the oxygen. And I showed you earlier this afternoon what oxygen does in the cell. It's a powerful thing. So tobacco is damaging DNA. Tobacco also you've got nicotine, which is a poison to the body, but it's estimated about 4,000 chemicals in a cigarette now. So these stimulants are not only damaging the DNA, but they're also leaching minerals out. So we're looking at what causes damage in the DNA, chemicals. Those of my era can probably remember the thalidomide tragedy, where babies were being born without arms. It's because their mothers were given a drug to help with morning sickness. That went on for quite a while before finally it was a stop, but also an illustration of how, you see, drugs are chemicals. But let's start with just the chemicals that many people are using in their homes. I was talking to a pest control guy that did our program. I said, is it true that many women can buy in the supermarket things that you're forbidden to use? He said, yes. So be careful what you're using to clean your bathroom. In my laundry cupboard, you'll find sodium bicarbonate and white vinegar and a bottle of eucalyptus oil to give it a nice scent afterwards. And you save a lot of money when you just go for those types of cleaners. Be careful what you're washing your hair, what you're putting on your body. And there are 2 fabrics which were created in a chemical laboratory. That's enough for me. So they're chemical fabrics, polyester, nylon, and acrylic. A lot of people don't realise this, that these are chemical fabrics, so they should not be specially touching the human body. Also, they give off positive ions, and positive ions are the more dangerous ions, and they actually attract more positive ions. So ladies, be very careful of what you're wearing next to your skin. Men wear cotton underpants, cotton undershirts, cotton shirts, cotton jeans. Is that right? But the ladies like the pretty things. And it's often those pretty things that can be made out of these chemical fabrics. So please go for your linen, your cotton, silks. And there are some fabrics that are made of wood pulp. You might not be aware that they are considered natural fabrics. And that is viscose, which is bamboo, rayon, and also modal, M-O-D-A-L. They're all made from wood pulp. But isn't the wood softened with chemicals? Well, it is, but all you have to do is wash it and hang it in the sun for the line. Do you remember those things called clotheslines? That's all we Australians have is clotheslines. I was in Alabama once and I washed my clothes. I said to the lady, "Where's your clothesline?" She said, "Oh, you're back with the dinosaurs." She said, "My grandmother used to use that." You know, the clotheslines are important. In fact, the clothesline company should be giving me a commission. Is that right? Sunshine purifies, sunshine detoxes. So it's a great thing to put your clothes out in the sun. Helps to detoxify. Even cotton, you got to wash it first, hang it on the clothesline for a day in the sun, because cotton is one of the most sprayed crops. So these wooden fabrics made out of wood, please wash them first. But just to give you an idea of the many ways we are being exposed to chemicals today. And little by little, like the dripping tap on a stone, these chemicals are coming in and they're interfering with our DNA. If 92% of DNA damage is caused by a mineral deficiency, well, what will heal? The DNA. Minerals. Where can we get our minerals from? The Celtic salt. The Celtic salt has about 82 minerals, and apparently because of a certain person talking about it, it's hard to get now. But you can get Baja salt, B-A-J-A. That's another hand-harvested sea salt. So there are a few that you can get today. So taking that before every glass of water, just a little tiny bit, and also putting it on your food. And dark green leafy vegetables, they're probably the next highest source of minerals, but it must be organic. Organic food is much higher in minerals. So please get the chemicals out of your home, and the biggest chemical company in the world is the pharmaceutical company. Drugs never cure disease. They just change the form and location. Again, a drug can save a life in a crisis. We're not talking about crisis. We're talking about day-to-day things. So these can all come in and damage the DNA. Also, electromagnetic field. This is called the silent killer, the excess. And this is a contributing factor to disease today. Remember, there's always a reason if someone is not well. That's why you've got to look at the history and look at all of these things. I've read of people who didn't get sick until a smart meter got put in their home. Now, it used to be that it was against the law to build houses under the big electrical wires. Have you noticed in housing estates today, they're building houses under those electrical wires? I've also heard of people getting very sick in a community and cancer high, and then we discover that the houses were built on a landfill and the chemical that was put in there. So this is why history is very important. You've got to dig, dig, and have a look at the contributing factors. So be careful on your exposure to electromagnetic field. I was reading the report of a breast surgeon, and he said it's alarming how many women, young women in their 30s, are getting breast cancer in the breast where they put their mobile phone into their bra. They can even buy a sports bra today that's got a pocket in there. And I wonder how many Femurs are going to start breaking down because now they put it in there. What about the back pocket? How many hip replacements are we going to be looking at in another 20 to 30 years? So please don't put that phone on your body. Put it in your bag. 80% of Americans sleep with their phone, the figures show, and the pillow is no protection. So we should sleep in an electromagnetic field-free zone. And some might say, but I'm on call. We'll put it in the bathroom, you'll hear it. Put it in the hall, you'll hear it. And you'll sleep better without that electromagnetic field zooming round. And so please be cautious of kids. You know, don't give them the phone, give them a sandpit out the backyard. Is that right? One lady said, but there's bugs in there. I said, forget the bugs. They're not as dangerous as the phone. So, you know, the children's head, their skulls aren't as thick as ours. And many adults give the phone to the little ones to keep them quiet. It'll keep them quiet until you try and take it off them. Yeah, so better not. So this is another thing that is contributing to DNA damage. Genetically modified foods. Genetically modified foods is the result of the DNA of two different species being spliced together to produce, for instance, the Atlantic salmon, tomato, hoping to create a tomato plant that grows in the snow, but it actually doesn't. But what we've got now, we've got a tomato with 5 centers. We've got a tomato that when you eat it, it can damage your DNA. President Vladimir Putin, Russia's president, it was about 25 years ago, he passed a law that any Russian who grows or sells genetically modified foods is to be considered a terrorist. Did you know that he's giving land away to Russians who will grow organic, non-GMO food? Now, that bit didn't get in the news, did it? And unfortunately, Monsanto is so big, you know, saying things like this, the YouTube will take these meetings down. We'll just have to put them up on Rumble. But Monsanto is so big that they win every court case where Americans and Australians are trying to campaign to get it put on packaging. Is it genetically modified? Unfortunately, they win the court cases. But if you buy organic, you can be 99% sure that it's not GMO, because if an organic farmer uses genetically modified seed, he loses his organic status. And if it says certified organic, you can believe it, because those farmers have to jump through so many hoops just to get that stamp. I can't guarantee in the farmer's market where the backyard, I don't know what they're doing in their backyard, you know, they might say they're organic, I don't know, but it's a good idea to start growing your own. It's a good idea to start collecting seeds that are not hybridized. And I think people started to really think seriously of this in 2021. The fact that everything's eased, does that mean it's going to stay eased? I don't think so. I think now's the time to start looking at, can you move further out? Can you start growing a little bit of your own food? So the genetically modified food, its danger is that it can contribute to the damage in our DNA. Mold. In nature, you'll often see fungus and mold taking over plants. There's even I was reading in one story about how if mold overtakes this certain snail, the antennas grow twice the size and have psychedelic colours in them. So can mold come into our DNA? I was surprised at how mold is rarely spoken about in medicine, because unfortunately a lot of their drugs are putting it into the body. So let me look at one very popular one, which is an antibiotic. I'm not against antibiotics. They've saved lives. They will save lives. But the problem today, and the World Health Organization, I know in Australia, in every doctor's surgery, there's a plaque that says the biggest healthcare risk today is the overuse of antibiotics. Antibiotics should be kept for life-saving. So what is an antibiotic? Notice what the word means. It means against life. Alexander Fleming, in 1929, he was growing bacteria in flasks in his laboratory. He came in one morning and all his bacteria was dead. Now, as a scientist, he was taught Newton's third law of motion. To every action, there's an equal and an opposite reaction. Why did his bacteria die? He looked around the laboratory, couldn't find anything, but he noticed there was an open window near the flask. The sun's rays were coming in and there was a heavy dust on the sun's rays, and the heavy dust settled on his bacteria. So he quickly looked out and he found on the next story, open window. In the open window there was a plate of fruit, and in the plate of fruit there was a mouldy orange. So the dust was coming down and settling on his bacteria and killing it. So he called the mould penicillium. Remember this from school days? But the mould waste, which is more toxic than the mould, he called penicillic acid. And the penicillic acid is the penicillin that we know today. As I said, I'm not against antibiotics. But the problem today, and the World Health Organization has declared this, is the overuse of antibiotics. And I gave you that simple illustration of the little boy and his finger. He just needed hot and coals and grated potato. He didn't need antibiotics. Medicine calls the mould waste a mycotoxin. And if you have a look in a medical dictionary, you look up myco. Myo is muscle, but myco means mould. You will find page after page after page, mycopneumonia, mycoarthritis, myco, showing the link with mould with many diseases, even to the point where it is able to damage the DNA. And this is why I wrote a book on it. It's called Self-Heal by Design. I think they've come in. And Self-Heal by Design, I have a look at the history of mould. I even go to the Bible. In fact, I think it's the most accurate and oldest history book we have. And it says in there, if there's mould in the house, then the person has to get all the grout out of the stones, clean it, re-grout it, or mortar it, close it up. After 2 weeks, the authorities come back and open it up, and if it's grown again, the whole house has to be dismantled and taken outside the city to an unclean place. That's what the Bible says. So this stuff's toxic. It says if there's mould in the clothes, they have to be burnt. So in the King James Version of the Bible, it calls leprosy in the house. That's what it calls the mould. It calls it leprosy in the clothes and leprosy on the skin. So if you go to the New International Version, it says mildew in the house, mildew in the clothes, infectious skin disease on the skin. But it's the same Hebrew word. So what should they really be called? Leprosy on the skin. Mold on the skin. So the fungal link with disease is, when I started to research into it, I was quite surprised. And then I realized that the reason that medicine balks so much at linking this together is because some of their most popular drugs are putting it in. As I said, the body can cope with a couple of courses of antibiotics in a lifetime. But most people should go through their whole life not having them. And if there is what's called an infection, like what we saw with this little boy, then we find out why. Matchbox cars in the dirt. No wonder. That's a wonderful reaction of his immune system to that. We just need to come in with the hot and colds and the grated potato, give the body the right conditions, and it will heal up. So I raised 8 children with no antibiotics, and they're all still alive. And guess what? They're doing the same to their children. Because it works. And before I was banned, let's look at 2015, there were 4 doctors that used to get me to go to their town and give meetings, because if everyone knew what you're learning this week, that would just cut down casualty visits so much. So it was on the 8th of December, down by the beach on the rocks with my 2 little grandchildren walking along the rocks. I stood on a very slippery rock, not realising it was slippery till I stood on it. Both feet went out, my whole body went up in the air and slammed down on this wrist, and it was very painful and it looked extremely strange. And I knew this was beyond a potato poultice. But I had to sit in emergency for 6 hours before the orthopedic surgeon saw me. Why? Because the whole system is chocked up with people that don't know what to do because their heart's racing, or their blood pressure's gone up, or their little finger's sore. Or one lady said, I feel sick. And the nurse said, have you been drinking today? Well, just a few. So I'm sitting there in the most excruciating pain, and the whole system's chocked up with these people, and I'm sitting there thinking I could fix him and I could fix him and I could fix her and I could fix it. And I'm very glad for pain-killing medication. I was in so much pain. But as soon as the bones got pulled back into place, the radius was totally broken and out of place. I did a real good job. And I praise God for the skill of the orthopedic surgeon, and also my husband and I prayed very much that bone would be put, and it was. So I'm very thankful for that. But, once those bones are in place, I didn't have the pain. Can you see my body was screaming at me, this is actually very, very serious, and that pain has a purpose. But I was confronted with how many people don't know what to do. And I sat there thinking, now I know why I do what I do. Because the system is so chocked up. And I thought, what an incredible thing that we've come to a time on planet Earth where we don't know how to look after ourselves. We don't know how to just treat simple little bits and pieces. And you talk to any doctor and nurse, and when you mention this, they roll their eyes. They say, oh, tell us about it. There's so many people going into the system so that when someone is seriously injured and in a huge amount of pain, they have to sit there for 6 hours. And I was told I was on the fast track. I would have hated to be on the slow track. I think medicine has a place in a crisis. But because it does help in a crisis, people are going there for little tiny bits and pieces that could be easily helped. It is a fact that though genetics loads the gun, it is lifestyle that pulls the trigger. And the story I gave you of my father and my sister and my son are illustrations to show that even though we might have a genetic weakness, it can be strengthened. And that study is called Epigenetics. You may have heard of it. Epigenetics is the effect of our lifestyle on our genes. And what this research is showing is that our genes can be switched on or off depending on what we're doing to our body, what we're drinking, what we're eating, even the stress in our life. Now, all of those bits and pieces we have total control over. That's why I'm the master of my destiny. I'm the one that chooses whether I drink 2 glasses of water a day or 8 glasses of water a day. So you put it by your bed. See water, will drink. Just always have it there. Just something as simple as that. But that's just one of many parts that you'll learn this week that can turn those genes on or off. My mother died a cripple in a wheelchair at the age of 51 with rheumatoid arthritis. I have strong inherited genes there. Notice that I'm not a cripple, I'm not in a wheelchair, and I'm not dead, and I'm way past 51. Because it's genetics that loads the gun, yes, but lifestyle that pulls the triggers. So all those poor ladies that cut their breasts off because they had the gene, no need. But you know what there is a need for? There is a need for balancing the hormones. And I think we're going to be looking at that on Thursday. So this is just the first day. We've just begun our journey